One of the biggest problems in our education system is the lack of government funding, which can negatively impact the overall function of the school. Based on the article, Poverty of Education, by the organization Child Fund, we learned that government funding can cause students to overcrowd schools that have no access to computers or properly taking care of school equipment, like desks and whiteboards. From our thoughts, we can see that overcrowding would become a problem if government funding was unable to pay for bigger facilities to house students and their needs. Not only is government funding a problem, but also the budget cuts from the current funding schools receive. Although schools are struggling with the current budget they are given, the government chooses to cut even more out of the gross domestic product on education to put towards other aspects. As the Economic Policy Institute put it, schools of color and those in poverty-stricken areas receive less funding per student than low-poverty schools that are predominantly white, which allows us to see the inequality of our school system budget cuts. The second greatest problem ties into government funding and budget cuts because it is those who are impacted, people in poverty and those who have limited access to education. Based on Penn Foster's How Education Inequality Impacts Student Success, we found that the lack of income in some students' homes can lead to their limited access to educational support, like tutors and school supplies, which could help improve their education. Penn Foster's also wrote that, statistically, those from lower income families are less likely to pursue higher education. For older students, they could be put into work at local shops in order to help their families get out of poverty, which could conflict with their school schedule, causing them to drop out. The third and last problem we identified in our education system is the lack of teachers actively teaching students around the U.S. Through the article, Teacher Shortages in the U.S. by Newman University, we found that there are three major points of this problem: larger class sizes, widening achievement gaps, and limitation to certain classes. Without the proper amount of teachers, it can be hard for schools to maintain their variety of classes, especially since teachers cannot teach two classes at the same time. The solution to this would be to cut back on the variety and only allow classes that are necessary, which means cutting back on honors and extracurricular classes. This leads to the reduction of class variety and the increase in class size. Teachers would now be left with fewer classes, yet more students per class, which also limits the ability to create individual bonds with students, especially if the classes are 32 students big. This would mean that it would be harder for students to communicate their needs since the teachers will now have double the number of students to watch over. Larger class sizes lead to the increase of achievement gaps per class. Now that the teacher would be handling a huge class, they would have a variety of students that learn at different paces, causing some students to be bored with the subject while others are struggling to even understand it. The teacher would have to plan their lesson knowing that they will have to keep those who are higher level interested while also covering concepts that the students at lower levels are struggling to understand.
What ideas do you have to improve our educational system and practices? I will be presenting some educational practices that would improve students' learning and capabilities. Keeping students engaged with project-based learning will help students go beyond the textbook. They will be able to study complex problems and real-life issues. If students were able to have project-based learning, they will be able to leave the traditional textbook in the past because this requires book-based learning instruction. This is the traditional system that requires students to memorize and answer questions. Project-based learning is more than just using the traditional textbook with book-based learning instructions. From the traditional answer the question and memorizing the answer, students will still have collaboration skills they can use to help each other with assignments. This teaching method will allow students to use critical thinking skills, creativity, and this will create communication skills. The different technology I would incorporate to improve our educational system practices is interactive whiteboards. This will accommodate students that are having a problem seeing the traditional whiteboard or have lost interest in the old-fashioned whiteboard. Teachers will be able to create interactive learning lessons by integrating multimedia content and interactive activities for students to follow. Online learning platforms would improve our educational system practices by using another program that will inspire students' creativity and keep a student's attention. These programs consist of different online learning platforms such as Moodle, Canvas, and Blackboard. Currently, Canvas is being used by school districts across the nation. One main idea I would like to discuss is student safety. The school district should implement stronger background checks for teachers and aid workers in the school. Creating a good routine for safety would improve our educational system and practices. While technology advances, students should feel safe on campus and online. If security measures are updated regularly, students will be able to have a more successful year in class. This will help with creating a positive learning environment. Security measures should be put in place for online learning to protect the information of students and teachers and also parents. The infrastructure should be strengthened for students to feel safe for online learning. One of the main reasons for our budget shortfall is cybersecurity expenses and litigations. To improve our education system and practices, the district should implement security measures to create a stronger foundation for students and parents with stronger passwords, updated Chromebooks, and firewalls. Teachers will be able to access information in a timely manner without any problems.
Here are some examples of current innovations in education. Gamification. Gamification in education is simply when educators employ game-like designs and systems of play in their classrooms to encourage more student engagement. The games are usually constructed in a way that attempts to challenge the students to socialize, compete, and get creative. The goal may not always be to create a game in itself, but in many ways the lesson can still be gamified just by giving something a new feel, such as decorating a room to match the lesson's theme. Gamification is a tool that should not be used to change a learning goal, but to make it more fun by building motivation and drawing interest. Examples of gamification in education could look like students receiving in-program awards when they pass a level on an at-home learning tool or having the class compete for a prize. Though, gamification does not always have to be directly rewards-based and can be as simple as giving each student their own avatar that they can unlock customizations for over time. Gamification has no limit, and if explored deeper, may become one of the most beautiful ways to foster education. Blended learning models. Blended learning models are forms of hybrid learning, or a mix of in-person and remote learning, allowing for more flexibility in education. There are 6 blended learning models, consisting of the face-to-face driver model, where students have a live meeting style instruction virtually and do their homework afterwards. There is the flipped model, which is essentially the face-to-face driver model, but with extra learning materials and resources distributed before instructional time. Both of these styles require extra time and energy from the instructor, but with the potential to see more growth in students, it could be worth it. The enriched virtual model is where the student decides the pace of their coursework. They have access to optional lectures virtually, but can do all of their work without meeting face-to-face with their instructors. The flex learning model is where students can determine when and how they want to attend virtual or in-person lectures, which leaves the instructor's work time at the discretion of the students. Learners who are unmotivated or willing to adapt may stick to what they are used to, which will not play to their benefit. The rotation model puts students into groups and rotates the groups between individual instruction with pre-recorded videos, live instructional meetings, and self-led assignments. Essentially, the flex model, but at the instructor's discretion instead. The final model is the online driver model, where the students can do the entirety of the course without any instructors, with all of their work being completely at their own pace and discretion, where they can request help, but ultimately do not need it if they do not choose. These are just a few ways in which education is beginning to evolve, allowing for teachers to test out different styles of learning in their classrooms and experiment with their own styles of teaching. This is important as it gives instructors a better understanding of themselves, their students, and how they react to different teaching styles being employed.